The Beacon by Katy Haye. Sassa knew there'd be trouble before it even started. Ma had told her to take Will and get out of the house, and Sassa had taken her at her word. They'd spent the whole day at the shore, waving off the fishing boats at dawn, then searching for treasure, either that buried by pirates in the sand, or the treasure they could find in the tide pools when the waves retreated. Now, with the sun kissing the horizon and the air cooling, the pair of them were tired, sunburned, and half-soaked, with their breeches sticking to their calves. Sassa just hoped the limpets they'd been able to pry off the rocks would appease Ma. Returning with food usually meant only the lightest of scoldings. "Boats!" They were halfway up the cliffside path when Will called out. Sassa turned on the narrow track, twisting to follow her brother's pointing hand. Fate ran a chill finger down her back when she saw the vessels bobbing in the cove. 3, 4, 5. Will finished counting in triumph at having got the numbers right. Sassa didn't feel anything like triumph. "Those aren't fishing boats," she said, through lips that felt suddenly numb. She grabbed Will's hand. "We need to get home, quick." The boats were round and unfamiliar, and the bulky shapes of the men in them didn't look in the least like fishers. Sassa saw a gleam of metal, then more. They looked like the men from stories of raiders. Sassa tugged Will up the path as quickly as she dared. It was steep and narrow and the sun was sinking rapidly, but they had to hurry. She remembered the stories the men of the village had shared around the fire in the winter. They hadn't been meant for her ears. Her ma and pa thought she was asleep, but she'd crept back to the fireside, taking care to keep in the shadows so she wouldn't be discovered and sent to bed. She wanted to know what the adults talked about. She wanted to hear the stories too. She'd heard the tales of the men from over the sea who raided villages, stole the animals and anything of value, killed anyone who tried to stop them, and kidnapped the children to make into slaves. Sassa had crept away after that, shivering. The last raid had happened before she was born, but the tales were vivid in everyone's minds. The tales made sure they kept everyone alert, so the warning beacons would be ready in case they were needed. The tales made sure Sassa had woken screaming. Ma had stroked her hair off her face, kissed her and told her not to worry. "We'll keep you safe. We keep each other safe, hey?" Sassa had nodded and hugged her mother's warmth and told herself the raiders wouldn't come, not for years and years. Sassa paused when they reached the crest of the cliff and the ground levelled. The sun was almost below the horizon, stretching the shadows like long fingers reaching towards Sassa and Will. The first boat had reached the shore, the others close behind. Sassa fancied she could hear the hull dragging over the shingle. The raiders had stayed away for years, but they were here now. And how could the village keep itself safe against 5 boats filled with raiders bristling with weapons? How could they keep safe when they didn't even know danger was here? If Sassa and Will ran, they might reach the village ahead of the raiders so they could warn everyone. But it would be a close thing. Will couldn't run fast, and couldn't run for long at all. Sassa looked the other way, up the gently sloping hillside. "I want to go home," Will said plaintively. Sassa nodded decisively. "We will, but not yet." She grabbed Will's hand and turned them in the opposite direction to home, heading up the hill as the gloom gathered fast around them. During the day the path was clear, but now they stumbled and blinked in the fading light, tripping on stones and tussocks. Will whimpered. Sassa gritted her teeth to stop them chattering. "We're on an adventure," she told Will determinedly. "I want to go home." "Soon, I promise." Sassa glanced back. She couldn't see the boats or the beach now. Everything was hidden by the darkness. But she fancied she could hear heavy footsteps striding from the shore towards the village. Chittering sounded in the darkness. Something rustled. The wind tugged at their hair. Will gripped her hand and whimpered again. "It's an adventure," Sassa insisted. "We'll have fine tales to tell everyone when we get home." "I want Ma." "Soon, I promise." Sassa almost dragged Will onwards, and bit back a sob of relief when the path led around a corner, and the solid bulk of the tower blotted out the waxing moonlight. "I need you to help me," she told Will, mostly to keep him occupied so he wouldn't keep asking for home. "I need you to be a big boy." Will nodded, eyes wide with trust. "Take this." Sassa grabbed the leather cover, offered a corner to Will and began to tug. "Heave!" she cried. The cover was stiff and heavy, and Will was no help at all, but finally they pulled the cover off the hearth and into a heap on the floor. Sassa reached for the shelf she knew she'd find somewhere around the hearth. There, a cubbyhole in the stone holding flints and dry tinder, kept in readiness. Making a fire was an important job. Sassa wasn't allowed to do it at home yet, but she'd watched her ma and pa. She knew the steps. The top of the hearth was covered with sticks, logs set on one side. She could do this. She struck the flints. Nothing. Again and again. Finally she got the angle right for sparks to form, tiny dots of light against the darkness. Will watched, thumb in the corner of his mouth, captivated by the fire-making process the way Sassa had always been when she watched her parents. It was far harder than they made it look, but finally a couple of sparks landed just right in the tinder, and a flame burst to life. Sassa dropped the flints, cupping her hands to shelter the tinder as well as she could, blowing gently as the dried moss burned and the sticks over it began to smoulder. With a huff, one of the sticks caught. Sassa blew carefully, the way Ma and Pa did. The fire travelled to the next stick, and the next. Sassa's heart lifted. She'd done it! Setting larger sticks over the thin ones, she nurtured the fire carefully until the dry wood roared to life, throwing flames into the sky, sparks drifting up like stars in miniature. Sassa turned back. The village was a little way down the hill. Everything lay in darkness. Had the raiders reached it? Images from the stories crept into her thoughts and she pushed them away determinedly. "We made a fire, Will," she told her brother. "Isn't this fun?" "I want to go home," Will said, but he held his hands out to warm at the fire all the same. "Soon," Sassa said. It was a reflex by now. She continued to scan the darkness. There. A fire sparked to life down the hill. A gleam, and then bigger. A brighter fire, further inland. The beacon had been spotted. The village was alerted. There was hope. That was The Beacon by Katy Haye. Thanks for listening.